The whole time, she never took off her wedding ring. I didn't think much of it, not at first. Just a little circle of silver glinting in the dashboard light. A promise to someone else. But then I saw that same silver band on the hand of the state trooper tapping on my glass. And I knew. I was already cooked. The trap wasn't up the road. I was sitting right inside it. Night. That's my time. Always has been. The world gets quiet, the static of daylight fades into a dull hum you can feel in your bones, a vibration that lives in the fillings of your teeth. The four-wheelers and their petty angers, their tailgating and their brake checking, they all go to bed, tucked away in their little identical houses with their mortgaged dreams and their barking dogs. And the highway, it breathes. It stretches out, a black river flowing through the heart of the country, and it belongs to us again. Me, my Freightliner Cascadia, and 2 million miles of ghosts riding shotgun in the rearview. They're the faces you see once in a diner and never again, the voices on the CB that fade into the distance, the memories of sunrises over mountains you can't quite name anymore. They're the echoes of every wrong turn and every right one, the weight of the miles themselves. This was one of those nights. I-40, westbound through New Mexico, a ribbon of asphalt laid over an ocean of black desert. The kind of drive where time melts, where the minutes stretch and snap and you lose all track of whether it's been an hour or a lifetime since the last town. The sky was so dark, so completely starless under a thick blanket of cloud, it felt like you could fall right up into it if you stared too long, a suffocating velvet dome. There was just the deep, steady hum of the Cummins engine, a 500 horsepower mantra that vibrates right through the seat, up your spine, and into the base of your skull, shaking loose the day's worries. That, the smell of burnt coffee from a pot that was last properly cleaned a week ago, and the lonely green and amber glow of the dash. It's not much, but it's mine. Home. It's the only home that hasn't kicked me out. I was pushing it. Trying to make Flagstaff by sunrise with a load of industrial machine parts nobody cares about, going to a factory nobody thinks about. Anonymous steel for an anonymous purpose. The poetry of my life, written in diesel fumes and logbooks. The pressure was on, not from dispatch, they'd given up trying to ride me years ago, but from myself. The longer you sit, the more you think. The more you move, the more you can forget what you're running from. It's a simple equation. Keep the wheels turning, and the demons have a harder time catching up. My demons weren't monsters with horns, they were quieter. They were the memory of a slammed door, a set of house keys left on a kitchen counter, and a voice on the phone saying, "I just can't do this anymore, Sam. I can't be married to a ghost." Then the CB crackled to life, a burst of static that cut through the engine's hum like a knife. It's a sound that can mean anything, salvation, boredom, or danger. It's the pulse of the highway, the only real connection you have out here in the void. It wasn't the usual chatter, no good oil boys warning about a bear trap at mile marker 82, no arguments about the price of fuel or the best place to get a steak in Amarillo. The airwaves were mostly dead tonight, a graveyard of skipped signals and atmospheric hiss. This was different. The static parted for a voice that didn't belong on that frequency. It was like finding a pearl in a bucket of motor oil, a clean, clear signal in a world of grit. Dash, sound of CB static, then a woman's voice, clear but trembling slightly. Breaker 19, any driver heading west, can you read me? This is Bluebird. Come back. Bluebird. The name was too soft, too delicate for the grit and grime of the airwaves. Truckers pick handles like road hog or grave digger or sawbones. Something with teeth. Something that sounds like it's been scraped along the asphalt. Bluebird was a song, and this was no place for singing. It snagged on something in my chest, a rusty hook I didn't know was still there. It reminded me of a song my ex-wife used to hum while she was gardening. A sharp, unexpected jab of memory. I waited a beat, expecting someone else to answer, one of the other night crawlers out here in the void. Silence. Just the hiss of the empty channel, the sound of loneliness itself. I keyed the mic, the plastic cool and familiar against my thumb. You got long haul Sam, Bluebird. What's your 20? Over. A pause. A long one. The static hissed like a rattler coiled in the dark, waiting. For a second, I thought the signal had dropped, that she was gone, another phantom on the wire, another story without an ending. Then she came back, her voice closer, more desperate, the professional calm of the radio call cracking under the strain. I'm at the old rest stop. The one they closed down. Mile marker 114. My car, it just died on me. It went completely dark. I don't have a signal out here. My phone's dead. Please, is anyone out there? I think I'm the only person alive in this whole state. My hand tightened on the wheel. My knuckles went white. A closed rest stop. In the middle of the New Mexico desert. At 2 a.m. Every alarm bell I owned, forged over 20 years of bad choices and near misses, started screaming a symphony in my skull. This is how you get rolled. This is how you end up in a ditch with your wallet gone, your rig torched, and your head ringing for a week. I remembered a story from an old-timer, a guy named Gus, back when I was still wet behind the ears. He'd stopped for a stranded woman in Arizona. Her brother came out of the darkness with a tire iron. Gus lost 3 teeth and a week's pay. The first rule of the road, passed down from the old-timers: you don't stop for voices in the dark. The road is full of traps, and the most dangerous ones have a pretty voice. I should have kept my thumb off that button. I should have just put the hammer down, cranked up the radio, and let her become another ghost story told over a plate of greasy eggs at some forgotten truck stop. Heard about a gal called Bluebird out by the 114. That's how it's supposed to go. You mind your business. You protect your rig. You stay alive. But there was a tremor in her voice. It wasn't an act. I've been lied to by experts, from dispatchers to lot lizards to my own ex-wife. I know the sound of a hustle. It has a certain rehearsed quality, a little too smooth. This was something else. This was the sound of a frayed rope about to snap. It was the sound of true, bottom-of-the-well fear. I'd heard that sound before. In my ex-wife's voice, over a crackling phone line from a payphone in a town I can't remember, the night she told me she was done trying, that the road had won. The sound of the end of the world. Damn it. Road karma. It's a real thing. What you put out onto the blacktop, it comes back to you, sooner or later. It's the road's own ledger book. Alright, Bluebird, I grumbled into the mic, the words tasting like rust and regret. Don't you go nowhere. I'm about 10 miles out. I'll see what I can do. Keep your doors locked, till you see a freightliner with its 4 ways on. And don't open them for nobody else, you copy. The exit for 114 was a dark wound in the side of the highway, no lights, no signs of life, just a crumbling patch of asphalt being reclaimed by weeds and shadows. The rest area sign was there, but someone had painted a crude black X over it years ago, and underneath, in dripping red letters, "No gas and no hope." I geared down, the percussive PSSSH 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 of the air brakes cutting through the quiet rain that had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that seemed to fall from a sky of solid rock. My headlights sliced through the gloom, 2 bright scalpels cutting into the darkness, and there she was. A silhouette, standing beside a beat-up sedan, its hood gaping open like a dead mouth. She was wearing a thin dress, the kind you wear to a summer party, not to a breakdown in a midnight downpour. It was clinging to her frame, soaked through, outlining a body that was clearly shivering. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face, a frantic dance of black strands against pale skin. I pulled the rig onto the shoulder. The whole 18-wheeler groaning in protest, the trailer tires crunching on loose gravel. I left the engine running, a low, protective growl in the night. You always leave the engine running. It's your heat, your light, your power. It's your escape route. It's the heartbeat that tells you you're not completely alone. I grabbed the heavy mag light from my door panel, my tire thumper, and swung my tired, 42-year-old body down from the cab. The drop felt longer than it used to. The rain was cold, instantly soaking through my shirt, plastering it to my skin. The air smelled of wet creosote, that sharp, herbal scent of the desert after a storm, mixed with the acrid tang of my own diesel exhaust. She watched me approach, a wary animal caught in the headlights. Her arms were wrapped tight around herself, shivering, but her chin was up. She wasn't cowering. Frightened, yeah, but there was a hardness in her eyes, too. A survivor's flint. "You long haul Sam?" she asked, her voice steadier up close, less a victim and more a witness. "That's me. What's the trouble?" I kept my distance, about 10 feet, the mag light held loose at my side, but ready. I swept the beam over the area around her car, checking the deep shadows by the boarded-up bathroom building. Nothing. "It just stopped," she said, gesturing vaguely at the engine block. No warning. The lights flickered, and then it just went quiet. I don't know the first thing about cars. I shined the big flashlight under the hood. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a nest of wires and hoses. It didn't take a mechanic to see the problem. It took an idiot not to. The battery cables weren't corroded, they weren't loose. They were clean off. Both of them. Lying neatly on the side of the engine bay as if placed there by hand. The terminals were shiny. This wasn't a breakdown. This was sabotage. This was it. The final off-ramp. My last chance to say, "Sorry, ma'am, looks like you need a tow, get back in my warm, safe truck and drive away." My gut was screaming at me, a tight, cold knot of pure instinct. This is wrong. This is a setup. Walk away now, the rain, the closed rest stop, the disconnected cables, it was a checklist for a robbery, written in big, bold letters. But then I looked at her. Really looked. I moved the flashlight beam from the engine to her face, and she flinched from the light. There was a faint, ugly bruise blooming on her cheekbone, a galaxy of purple and yellow the kind makeup tries and fails to hide under the harsh glare of a flashlight. And her eyes were pleading. Not for a jump start. For something else entirely. Sanctuary. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low and even, a conscious effort to sound calm when every nerve was firing. "This engine ain't starting tonight. Not without a toolbox and more time than we've got. Those cables were cut. Where you headed?" "Anywhere but here," she whispered, and the words hung in the air, heavy with everything she wasn't saying. They were the two most honest words I'd heard all year. Road karma. It's a bitch. You leave someone stranded, the road will find a way to leave you stranded, too. Maybe with a blown tire in the dead of winter in Wyoming, or a busted axle on a mountain pass with no signal. You pay your debts to the road, one way or another. I thought of a time I passed a broken-down family in a minivan in a Texas heatwave because I was behind schedule. My AC unit died an hour later, and I cooked in that cab for 200 miles. Karma. Against every goddamn instinct I had, I made a choice that felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. "All right. Get your things. You can ride with me to Flagstaff. We'll find a real mechanic there in the morning." The relief that washed over her face was like watching the sun come up after a long, dark night. It was so total, so absolute, it made my own cynicism feel like a sin. It was a look of pure, unadulterated deliverance. She nodded, unable to speak, and grabbed a single, small duffel bag from the back seat. Nothing else. Not a purse, not a coat. She was leaving a whole life behind in that dead car. She climbed up into the cab, a practiced motion that surprised me. Bringing the smell of rain and some faint, flowery perfume with her. It was the first time a woman had been in my truck in, hell, maybe 5 years. The space, my sanctuary of solitude, suddenly felt smaller, charged with a different kind of energy. The air was thick with her presence, a foreign element in my hermetically sealed world. I pulled us back onto the interstate, the rig gathering speed with a deep-throated roar, leaving the abandoned sedan and its secrets to the ghosts of Route 66. "My name's Lena," she said after a few miles of silence, her voice barely a murmur against the rumble of the engine. "Sam." The miles rolled by. Just the road, the rain tapering off to a fine mist, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the tires over the seams in the pavement. A hypnotic beat. I could feel her watching me. It wasn't an aggressive stare, more like she was studying a map, trying to figure out the terrain. I risked a glance over. She was looking at my hands on the wheel, then at the old, faded scar on my jaw from a misunderstanding in a Texas bar about a jukebox song. "You're not scared of me?" I asked, the question surprising me as much as her. It was a stupid question. I was a stranger, a big guy in a big truck in the middle of the night. She should have been terrified. She shook her head slowly, her wet hair clinging to her neck. "No. You have kind eyes." I almost snorted. Nobody's called my eyes kind since my mother, and she was contractually obligated. "My eyes are tired. They've seen too much road, too many sunrises through a dirty windshield. They're road maps of their own. They're just tired," I said. "What about you?" I asked, turning the question back on her. "Who are you running from, Lena? People don't just disconnect their own battery cables in the desert for fun. Or have someone do it for them." I laid the card on the table. Let her know I wasn't a complete fool. She flinched, a small, barely perceptible motion, but I saw it. She looked down at her hands, which were nervously twisting a simple silver wedding band around and around her finger. The movement was hypnotic, a tiny, frantic prayer. A confession without words. "My husband," she said, the words barely audible over the engine. He's a state trooper. He thinks he owns me. Thinks his badge gives him the right to." She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. I'd seen it enough. Men who mistake a uniform for a crown, a badge for a license to be cruel. Tonight, she continued, her voice gaining a sharp, brittle edge, like thin ice cracking. "He went too far. I waited till he was on shift. I took the car and I just drove. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there when he got home. I pulled off at the rest stop to think, and when I tried to start the car again, it was dead. He must have done something to it before he left for his shift. Disabled it somehow. To keep me on a leash. To make sure I could never get far." The story poured out of her then, a torrent of quiet desperation. It was plausible. Terrifyingly so. She told me about the control, the jealousy. How he'd pull people over just to brag about the fear in their eyes. The way he checked the mileage on her car after she went for groceries. The way he called her phone a dozen times a shift, demanding to know where she was, who she was with. She told me about the bruise, how he'd grabbed her face because she'd been 5 minutes late coming home from her sister's. With every detail she shared, the tension in the cab started to change. It was still there, but it was shifting from the sharp edges of my fear for myself to a dull, aching fear for her. The atmosphere was turning from something dangerous to something protective. Heavy and hot, like the air before a thunderstorm. We drove for another hour like that, her voice a low counterpoint to the engine's drone, the landscape outside a black, featureless void. I pointed the nose of the Freightliner toward a pool of lonely neon light shimmering in the distance, a man-made island in the sea of darkness. "I need coffee," I said, my throat dry from listening. "The real stuff, not this sludge." "You hungry?" She just nodded. A small, grateful motion, like a stray that had just been offered a warm place to sleep. The place was called the Comet. A classic greasy spoon, stranded in the middle of nowhere, a time capsule from the 1970s. It had the big, sweeping roof and the giant sign with half the neon tubes burned out, so it read, "The Com-T." We slid into a cracked red vinyl booth under the buzz of a flickering fluorescent light. The air smelled of old grease, fresh coffee, and desperation. The place was nearly empty, just us and a couple of other drivers hunched over their own mugs at the counter, lost in their own worlds. I watched her as she scanned the laminated menu, the light catching the dark tones in her hair. Out of the confines of the cab, she looked smaller, more fragile. The bruise on her cheek seemed darker under the fluorescent glare. The waitress, a woman with a face as tired as my own and a name tag that said, "Flo," came over with 2 mugs and a coffee pot. She filled them without a word, her eyes flicking from me to Lena, then back to me, a silent question in her gaze. I ordered 2 black coffees and a Western omelet for her. She hadn't asked for it, but she looked like she hadn't eaten in a week. "Thank you," she said when Flo set the plate down. She picked at the food at first, small, hesitant bites, then started eating like a starving person, with a focus that was painful to watch. We sat in silence for a bit, the only sounds the clink of her fork against the cheap ceramic plate and the low murmur of a late-night radio talk show behind the counter, a guy talking about aliens. "That scar," she said suddenly, nodding toward my jaw. "How'd you get it?" "Long story. Involves a bad hand of poker and a man who didn't like to lose," I said, my standard non-answer. It was true enough, but left out the part about the man's wife and a misunderstanding in the parking lot. Some stories are better left in the rearview. She smiled, a real smile this time. It changed her whole face, chasing away some of the shadows. "You look like a man with a lot of long stories." She looked down at my left hand, resting on the Formica tabletop next to my coffee mug. "Was one of them about a wedding ring?" I instinctively curled my fingers, a reflex I thought I'd lost years ago. The indentation on my ring finger was long faded, a ghost of a promise, but a person knew where to look. "That story's over," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "She didn't like the road. Or maybe she just didn't like me being on it. Said she felt like a single mom to a man who was never there. Can't say she was wrong." "I'm sorry," she said, and her eyes held mine. For a second, I almost believed she was. She had this way of looking at you, a direct, unnerving intimacy, like she could see right through the calluses and the road dust to the lonely man underneath. It was a dangerous talent. "It must be lonely out here." "It's what I know," I said, and left it at that. Back in the truck, the atmosphere was completely different. We'd crossed a line. We'd shared a meal. We'd stepped out of the roles of stranded motorist and rescuer, and into something more personal, more complicated. The cab, my rolling fortress of solitude, now felt like a shared secret. The vast, empty desert outside made it feel like we were the only two people left in the world. An arc in the middle of a black ocean. She didn't return to the passenger side window. She slid across the bench seat, closing the small distance between us. The bench seat in a Freightliner isn't built for two, but we made it work. The warmth of her leg pressed against mine, a live wire. Her hand came to rest on my knee. It was a simple touch, but after years of nothing but the vibration of the engine and the cold of a steering wheel, it sent a jolt right through me. A current I'd forgotten how to feel, a shock that woke up a part of me I thought had died. "Thank you, Sam," she whispered, her breath warm against my neck. She'd leaned in close, her hair brushing my cheek. The scent of her perfume was stronger now, mixed with the smell of diner coffee. "For the food. For stopping. For not being like him. Most guys wouldn't have," I said. My voice rougher than I wanted, trying to push back against the tide that was pulling me under. My gut was still whispering warnings, but my heart, the dumb, lonely bastard, was shouting them down. "I know," she said, her voice dropping lower, becoming thick and smoky, a sound that bypassed my ears and went straight to my spine. "That's why I called for you. I listened to a few guys pass. Their voices were hard. Gruff. You sounded different. You sounded steady. Like you could hold the whole world up." And then her lips were on mine. It wasn't a sweet, gentle kiss. It was desperate. Hungry. A collision of two lonely, broken people in the dark, trying to forget who they were for a few minutes. It was the kiss of someone who wanted to be erased, and my own loneliness was a willing accomplice. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and coffee and regret. I found a wide, empty shoulder, a place where the desert was flat and silent and watchful around us, and killed the headlights. The rain had stopped. The moon had broken through the clouds, bathing the landscape in a pale, ghostly light that made the sagebrush look like silver bones. What happened next? It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about lust, not really. It was about oblivion. It was about the heat of another person's skin chasing away the cold ghosts for a few precious minutes. The air in the cab got heavy, thick with the scent of her perfume and our breathing, a tangible thing. She leaned over the gear stick, the cold steel of the shifter pressing into her side, her eyes locking with mine with an intensity that burned, a silent dare. Then she disappeared below the dashboard. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the worn leather cool against my skin, my only anchor in the storm that had erupted in my own cab. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the deep silence of the desert. The windows fogged over, sealing us in our own private, steamy world, the whole rig rocking gently on its chassis, a secret rhythm in the heart of the desert. The dashboard lights cast a green, alien glow on the condensation, making the world outside disappear completely. It was the kind of payment you don't declare on your taxes, the kind of sin that feels like salvation in the moment. And through it all, as my heart hammered in my chest, as I fought for breath, I saw it. That glint of silver on her finger, catching the faint green light from the gauges whenever her hand moved. A constant, silent reminder. A warning I was too far gone to heed. A promise to someone else, being broken right here in my truck. Afterward, silence. The heavy, thick silence that follows a storm. She lay with her head on my shoulder, her breathing soft and even, her body warm against mine. For a second, just one damn second, it felt peaceful. Real. Like this could be a life. Waking up next to someone. It was a dangerous thought, more dangerous than any highway patrolman or blown tire. It was the kind of thought that gets a man's heart broken. That's when I heard it. A faint, tinny squawk. Dash, sound of a police radio squelch, very faint. I froze. Every muscle in my body went rigid. My blood ran cold. It wasn't my CB. The sound was too clean, too sharp. It was closer. Much closer. It was in the cab with us. I looked down at her duffel bag, wedged between the seat and the dashboard, right by my feet. The sound came again. A dispatcher's voice, distorted and low, but unmistakable if you've spent enough time on the road. Copy that, 3 Adam, 12, subject vehicle is a late-model sedan, abandoned at the 114, be advised, registered owner is on duty, dash. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. My throat went dry. I gently, slowly, disentangled myself from her. She stirred, a soft murmur of protest, but didn't wake. My hand was shaking as I reached for her bag. The zipper made a sound like a scream in the dead quiet of the cab. Inside, beneath a neatly folded change of clothes, was a portable police scanner, its little green light blinking patiently. And next to it, a service revolver, heavy and black and smelling of gun oil. A Glock 19. Standard issue for State Patrol. Her husband's, I guessed. Or hers. The whole story, the escape, the fear, the bruise, it was all smoke. A perfectly crafted lie. The disconnected battery cables. The damsel in distress act. The kind eyes. All of it. A script. And I had played my part perfectly. I felt sick. Used. A fool of the highest order. I wasn't her savior. I was the mark. I was the prop in their little play. But why? What was the play? A simple robbery seemed too complicated for this. This was elaborate. This was personal. I looked out the windshield, my eyes scanning the darkness behind me. In the far distance, maybe 5 miles back, I saw them. A pair of headlights, moving fast. Faster than any civilian car. And then, the flicker of red and blue, a deadly pulse painting the dark clouds. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a robbery. It was an execution. A slow one. She chose that exact moment to wake up. She sat up, not with a sleepy confusion, but with a sharp, sudden awareness. She stretched like a cat that just had a meal, and gave me a slow, lazy smile. It wasn't the smile of a victim. It was the smile of a predator. He's almost here, she said, her voice calm, casual, as if she were announcing the arrival of a bus. What is this? I demanded, my voice a low growl that came from the bottom of my gut, a place of pure, cold rage. What the hell is this, Lena? Or whatever your name is. Oh, Sam, she sighed, running a hand through her perfectly messy hair. It was all an act. Every last bit of it. The vulnerability, the fear, the gratitude. You truckers. So lonely. So damn willing to play the hero. She nodded toward the rapidly approaching lights. My husband, he doesn't like other men touching his things. And he, really, doesn't like it when they do it in a commercial vehicle, crossing state lines. It's a federal crime, you know. The Mann Act. Transporting a woman for immoral purposes. Very old-fashioned. Very effective. The trap, which I had walked into with my eyes wide open and my pants down, snapped shut with the force of a bare jaw. My career, my freedom, my whole life, gone. It was blackmail. A shakedown. They'd take every dime I had, and if I refused, they'd put me in a cage and throw away the key. And my word against a trooper and his bruised wife. A wife who would probably add a few more bruises to her own face for the courtroom photos. I wouldn't stand a chance. The flashing lights filled my mirrors, bathing the cab in strobing, nightmarish flashes of red and blue. A New Mexico State Trooper cruiser screamed to a halt right in front of my grill, blocking me in, its headlights pinning me like an insect. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a trooper's uniform got out. He moved with a cocky swagger, the confidence of a man who knows he holds all the cards. He took his time, adjusting his belt, letting the fear cook. I could see his face clearly in his own headlights. Smug. Satisfied. This was it. The moment the dream curdled into pure, uncut danger. The midpoint shift from savior to sucker. He walked up to the driver's side door and rapped his knuckles on the glass. The hand he used had a familiar silver wedding band on it. The same one she wore. A matched set. I powered down the window. The cold desert air rushed in, smelling of ozone and sagebrush, and it felt like a slap in the face, waking me up. Evening, the trooper said, a smirk playing on his lips. He shined his flashlight in my face, blinding me, then moved it to Lena. Well, well. Look what we have here. My loving wife, looking a little disheveled. And you, driver. You look like you just broke about a dozen laws, not to mention the trust of a happily married man. Lena didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just watched, her expression as blank as a new logbook, an accomplice waiting for her cut. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I refused to give him the satisfaction of hearing me beg. What do I want? He chuckled, a low, nasty sound that scraped my nerves raw. I want to uphold the law. But I'm also a reasonable man. A situation like this, it's messy. Paperwork, court, headlines. Trooper's wife found with long-haul trucker. Bad for my career. Bad for, well, real bad for you. I hear federal prison isn't kind to men like you. They have special places for guys who prey on vulnerable women. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of stale coffee and superiority. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. But maybe we can make a contribution to the Policeman's Benevolent Fund. A cash contribution. To show your remorse. Say, everything you've got in that wallet, and whatever you can pull from an ATM at the next stop. We'll call it $5,000. And we all forget this ever happened. You get to keep driving, and my wife and I can go home and work on our marriage. $5,000. It was my buffer. My safety net. My get home and retire a month early fund. It was 2 months of hard driving, of lonely nights and bad food. I looked from his smug face to her empty one. The rage was a hot coil in my stomach. They had done this before. I could see it in their practiced ease, their perfect timing. They were a team. A sickness on the road, preying on the loneliness they knew was out here because they were probably just as lonely and broken as the rest of us, but they'd chosen to be predators instead of survivors. My mind was racing. Run. No. Fight. Suicide. Pay. That's what they wanted. That's what a smart man would do. But I'm a trucker. We spend thousands of hours alone, just thinking. You learn to see all the angles. You learn to read the signs, not just the ones on the highway. And I remembered something. My dash cam. A little black eye staring out at the world, mounted right above the rearview mirror. It records video, sure, but it also records audio. On a constant loop. It was still on. It had recorded everything. Her lies. Her story about him. Her seduction. His threats. It was a long shot. A Hail Mary on a frozen field. But it was the only shot I had. I held his gaze. I didn't let him see the fear. I let him see the 2,000,000 miles. I let him see the bar fight in Texas and the blizzard in the Rockies. I let him see a man who was tired of being pushed around. A man with nothing left to lose. You know, I said, my voice as calm and cold as a winter lake. These new rigs, they got all sorts of safety features. Lane departure warnings, automatic braking, and dash cams that upload straight to a cloud server. Company policy. For insurance purposes. Every 30 minutes, a new GPS-tagged, encrypted file gets sent to a server in an office in Oklahoma City. For liability. I watched his face in the strobing lights. The smirk flickered. Just for a second, but it was there. A crack in the facade. A hairline fracture in his perfect confidence. So every word you just said? About the benevolent fund? It's probably already sitting on that server. Along with your wife's little sob story about you being an abusive husband, which, I gotta say, was a hell of a performance. Emmy-worthy. I almost cried. I was bluffing my ass off about the cloud. My cam stored to a little SD card I hadn't cleared in 6 months. But he didn't know that. All he knew was technology and corporate policy and liability, things that scared men like him more than a gun. I looked past him, at Lena. Her eyes were wide now. And her performance? Admitting to leaving the scene of a staged accident, luring me under false pretenses, that's conspiracy, last I checked. You're a cop. You know the law better than I do. That's a felony. For both of you. And all of it, every word, is backed up off-site. Your voice, her voice, mine. A nice little audio file for internal affairs to listen to. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. The only sound was the idling of his cruiser and the ticking of my engine as it cooled. The desert held its breath, waiting to see who would fold. He stared at me, his eyes boring into mine, trying to call my bluff. I didn't blink. I'd stared down black ice on Donner Pass and 100-mile-an-hour crosswinds in Wyoming. I could stare down a crooked cop in the New Mexico desert. Finally, he broke eye contact, glancing back at his wife. Her blank expression had been replaced by a flicker of raw panic. Their whole scam was built on fear and intimidation. It wasn't built to withstand a challenge. It was a house of cards, and I had just kicked the table. He took a single, deliberate step back from my truck, his posture deflating. The swagger was gone. You get the hell out of my state, he snarled, all the fake charm gone, replaced by pure, ugly venom. And if I ever see this rig again, I'll tear it apart bolt by bolt looking for a violation. He turned and stalked back to his cruiser without another word. Lena didn't look at me. She just opened the passenger door, grabbed her duffel bag, leaving the scanner and the gun behind on my floor like a bad tip, and scurried out of my cab, a shadow swallowed by the flashing red and blue lights. She got in his cruiser, and he peeled out, spraying gravel and dust, leaving me alone again in the vast, silent dark. I sat there for a long time, the engine humming my only companion. The windows were still fogged over from a warmth that had never been real. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't about the money or the threat of jail. It was the betrayal. That brief, fleeting moment of connection I'd allowed myself to feel was a lie, a tool she'd used to pry me open. She hadn't seen kind eyes. She'd seen a mark. A lonely, tired man who was an easy target. The oldest story in the book, and I'd fallen for it like a rookie. I reached down, picked up the heavy police scanner and the cold steel of the revolver, and without a second thought, tossed them out my window into the sagebrush. Evidence of a night that never happened. I finally put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The sun was just starting to touch the eastern sky, painting the clouds in shades of gray and bruised purple, a reflection of how I felt. A new day. Same old road. The road's got a long memory. It remembers the good deeds and the bad. It remembers the traps and the escapes. Road karma. I left them to theirs. Whatever sickness they had together, they could keep it. They'd try it again on some other lonely driver, and one day, they'd pick the wrong one. The road would collect its debt. I reached over and pulled down the sun visor. Tucked into the strap was a faded, folded photograph, creased from years of being moved and looked at. A woman in Montana, from a lifetime ago. Before the road took over completely. Her name was Clara. We'd met at a rodeo. She had a real smile, real eyes that didn't have a hidden angle. She was the reason I started driving, to save up for a piece of land. And she was the reason I stayed on the road after she left, because every small town looked a little like hers, and every sunrise felt like a chance to outrun her memory. The photo was a reminder that not everything is a lie, even if it feels that way sometimes. A reminder of what I was running from, and what I was still, foolishly, hoping to find again out here in the emptiness. I kept on driving, heading west. Just me, my Freightliner, and the long, empty road ahead. The ghosts were a little louder now, but I just turned up the radio. The sun was coming up, and I had miles to go before Flagstaff.